So initially, I think everyone was thinking, Pirates of the Caribbean 5? Isn't this horse, like, ridiculously dead at this point? But after the trailers came out, I at least thought, hey, that actually doesn't look that bad. Yes, there's still a good chance that it'll be awful, but I'm holding out hope. And those trailers got me so interested that I went back and watched all 4 of the Pirates films. So, here we are. Also, warning, there are spoilers ahead for all these films. There are time codes down in the description if you want to skip around. Alright, let's get into it. So let's start off with the universally loved one, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. Now this was a film that I'd wanted to watch for a while, because everyone kept telling me, the first Pirates is great, the first Pirates is great, and so I finally got around to it, and yeah, the first Pirates is great. If you know me, you know I love a good romp of a film, and this is precisely that. First off, the cast here is pretty great. Johnny Depp, say what you will about him now, but this was his huge performance that turned him into what he is today, which I wouldn't necessarily say is a good thing, but looking at this performance alone, it's great. It's funny, it's charming, it's super entertaining to watch, and in this first film, it never got grating to me. Jeffrey Rush as Barbossa, at first I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but as the film progressed, I started to really enjoy his performance. It's over the top, sure, but it works really well for this kind of film. That Kingsman agent who got cut in half, he's pretty good, as is pretty much the rest of the cast, from Gibbs to those 2 pirate henchmen. And as far as Keira Knightley and Orlando Bloom, they're good. In this one, they're the best that they are in the entire series. There's just nothing super special about them. Like, their romance is pretty good, and their chemistry is pretty good, and the acting is pretty good, but they aren't really super special, and they didn't really stick out to me like they did to a lot of people. I like seeing them in these roles, especially in the first film, and they're a good way of seeing the rest of the film, because if it was on Jack the whole time, yeah, that would get annoying. But I just think their characters weren't super complex or anything. This movie is directed by Gore Verbinski, who you can say what you want about the quality of his films, but they all look great. And this is absolutely no exception. The cinematography and the sets and the costumes and all that are amazing. The visual effects are also great in this, the practical ones, and surprisingly the CGI still holds up today pretty well. The movie's action is also great, there are fun set pieces, it's well choreographed, the film has a good plot, it has iconic moments, and it's quotable.
You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of me.
The music, which I'll come back to quite often here, but the music is phenomenal. Everyone knows it, but it is fantastic. Incredible score overall. And really, on the whole, it's just a super fun adventure film. On a scale of fun adventure films, it's below Indiana Jones for me, but it's above National Treasure, which, by the way, is a film that I kind of love for some reason. On the whole, it's just really enjoyable and entertaining and exciting and funny. As far as what doesn't work here, there are some dumb and really cheesy moments, but really, what do you expect from this kind of film? That's kind of the point. And again, I personally didn't think that whole Will Elizabeth plot was that intriguing. It was a little bit generic to be honest, but those aren't really major problems. In conclusion, Curse of the Black Pearl is a bit of a modern adventure classic, and it's super fun. Everyone's seen it by now, but if you haven't, I'd totally recommend it. I'll give the first Pirates a 9.1 out of 10. So after the huge success of the first Pirates film, doing a sequel that would live up to that hype would be an almost impossible task. And did they succeed? Well, not really. Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest isn't terrible. In fact, I don't think it's bad. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. Is it as good as the first though? No, not by a long shot. Alright, what's good about this film? The cast again is pretty great. Jack Sparrow is a bit less fun than in the first, but he's still pretty entertaining, and he has moments where he shines. The returning cast members are as good as they were before, the Will and Elizabeth story is still fine, and I really liked Bill Nighy as Davy Jones. The performance is great, and the visual effects on him are fantastic to this day. Davy Jones as a whole is a good villain, and bringing him and the Kraken and this whole more mystical aspect to this, for the most part, I think that was an interesting idea for this series. I think it goes a little too far into that territory in the next film, but here, the swashbuckling with even more magic-ish stuff than last time, I think works. The directing and cinematography are once again fantastic. The visual effects are, like I mentioned, amazing. The action is good again, especially those sword fights. And the music, of course, is awesome. Basically, everything the first film did well on the technical side is done well here again. And really, on the whole, the best thing I can say for this is that it's entertaining enough. It's got some fun moments, some creative ideas, some good action scenes, some jokes that land. It's a fine watch. It's just definitely not as special or as engaging as the first film. Now, as far as the bad here, well, really, it is kind of in the shadow of that first film, which movies should be judged on their own and shouldn't have to be compared to other movies. But it is a sequel, and the first half of this film especially is filled to the brim with references to the last film. So it's not like they're trying to make you forget about it. It's less fun than that first film, it's less funny too, it just overall feels like it has less energy. The goofy comic relief characters from the first film were good the first time around, and here they're barely fine. They're just not that funny. The film's plot is also dumb, and the film is way too long as a result. Like, the first one had dumb moments, but this one is so unnecessarily complicated, with betrayal after betrayal after betrayal after twist after betrayal, and it starts to get very repetitive and convoluted. This one is also more cartoony than the first, which is saying something because the first one was quite cartoony, but this one is like straight up a cartoon. I mean, just look at this. Sure, it's cool I guess, but it does remove tension when the physics are so on and off. Overall, Dead Man's Chest is a pretty meh sequel. It's not horrible, but it's nothing super special. There are some great moments, but really, after sitting on it for a week, I found that I really couldn't remember much about it. It's fine though, especially if you enjoyed the first. There are worse ways to kill 2.5 hours. I'll give Pirates 2 a 6.8 out of 10. So now we've come to the epic conclusion of the original trilogy. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. After sitting through the second film and then going pretty much immediately into this one, I was thinking, this is probably going to be a whole bunch of the same. And guess what? It's exactly that. Firstly, what's good here? Once again, the music's great, and the cinematography and direction by Gore Verbinski still is pretty fantastic. Blah blah blah, that should be pretty obvious at this point. The sets and visual effects are pretty flawless for the most part, the CGI still holds up today. There's also some good and somewhat creative action, although once again, it is just straight up cartoon unbelievable at points. But hey, most of it is still pretty cool. The film also takes something of a more weird, mystical turn than the others. Like the first two, especially the second, had elements of that, but this one just goes for it all out. And in some ways, I kinda like that. Because it commits fully to it, some of these really weird ideas end up being kind of entertaining. But then sometimes they play out a little too far, or they drag out the bit too much, and it gets less interesting and more just stupid. Especially by the third or so time those Jack Sparrow hallucinations showed up, it just started to feel like it was there to bloat out this insane runtime. The cast is also still pretty solid here, especially Jeffrey Rush and Bill Nighy, and even though he's starting to run low on charisma and likability, Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow still has quite a few pretty great moments. Something I've wanted to mention that I like about all these first three films is that they're surprisingly dark. Like going into these, I was under the impression that these were largely for kids, but there is some pretty messed up stuff in these films, which I liked. This movie also has a few funny moments and cool ideas, and that final battle is pretty good. It's nothing super new, it's mainly more sword fights and such, but it's still quite fun to watch, as most of the action is here. Now, what doesn't work here is pretty much everything that didn't work about the last film, plus a little more. These two movies could really blend together for me. They're quite interchangeable, which I think is one of the main problems. They're just kind of and nothing really sticks out about them to me and makes them individually special. In this film, there are too many characters and too many plot lines going at once. There's so many different things going on in this plot that it doesn't really flow and amounts to very little in the end. Once again, this plot is needlessly convoluted, again, with more backstabs and betrayals and motivations and debts and whatnot that at this point are getting kind of tedious. All of this again leads this film to being way too long. This movie also kind of lacks that great sense of fun that that first film had, and even parts of the second. There are some chuckle-worthy moments, but there's also some really dumb humor that doesn't work. The Will and Elizabeth stuff continues here, just like before. It's fine, just not anything I'm super invested in. In this one, they also try to add more drama to it, with more love triangle stuff with Jack Sparrow. I think they were trying to set that up, and it really doesn't add to the film. Those parts could have been cut down a bit and reduced the runtime. Also, yes, I said before, Jack Sparrow has some moments, but at this point, the whole bit is getting kinda old. The emotional moments in this film don't hit, and the stupid moments in this film are really stupid. Again, the other ones had some stupid moments, but this one goes all out on those. Especially, I do have to specifically mention this, during that final battle when Barbossa is marrying Will and Elizabeth in the middle of this massive fight. Even for a Pirates movie, that is total nonsense. I know some people love this stuff, including my friend and podcast co-host Freddie. He's just all over this, and that's fine, but personally, it doesn't work for me. In conclusion, Pirates 3 is a fine movie. It's not as good as the original, but I'd say it's about as good as the second. The main problem with it is that it's just kind of nothing. The first one is so memorable, so many awesome moments. These two movies just blend together for me. I saw these less than a month ago, and if you showed me a short scene from one of them, I probably couldn't tell you which film it was from. There's some good action, some great effects, some good performances, but there's also an unnecessarily complicated story with some really stupid moments. I'll give Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End a 6.5 out of 10. So now we've finally come to the fourth film in the series, and I believe the most expensive film of all time. Somehow. Pirates 4 on Stranger Tides. From what I've seen online, pretty much everyone hates this film. I'm sure this has some fans, but most of what I've seen is, I love the first three, and the fourth one blows. So, do I agree? In some ways, yeah. Once again, let's start off with the positives. For one, this is mercifully shorter than the others. Thank you so much for that. If I had to sit through another 2.5 to 3 hour one, I'd be dead right now. The music, once again, is still great. Some of the performances, old and new, are still pretty good. I especially liked Ian McShane as Blackbeard. Also, with this being the most expensive film of all time, there was some pretty good action, some really great sets, and some great visual effects. Look, there are a few fun moments, but that's about it. The rest of this film is just a really bland mess. Alright, Johnny Depp is Jack Sparrow at this point. It's gotten old. It's not terrible, but it's just so far from the fun and charm of the original, and it's kind of just devolved into catchphrases and slapstick at this point. Which, I'm not saying he was very far from that in the original, but there was more to it back then. There was more energy to it, and it felt like more effort was being put in. This, I think, is maybe the goofiest and silliest Pirates film. The others are plenty goofy, but from the very first scene, you can tell what this is going to be, and not in a good way. For this film, they switched Gore Verbinski for Rob Marshall, and while the movie looks good, it does lack the really beautiful visuals of the other three. The action, while pretty solid, also isn't as good as it was before, but even if this had the most thrilling action scenes and amazing visuals in the world, those still couldn't really have saved this, because again, while it looks nice, the story and the script are just really subpar. The film isn't really captivating at all. I found myself wanting to do something else or look at my phone for most of the movie. The pacing is kind of weird, where it slows down considerably at some points, and then it'll just zoom through some stuff, and the film also isn't particularly funny. There are a few moments that made me smile, but for the most part, the jokes fall flat in this one. Also, in this film, they got rid of Will and Elizabeth, or rather, Will and Elizabeth got away from this franchise, as I'm assuming they didn't want to return, so they tried to replace them with this Hunger Games guy and this mermaid. And look, you know how I feel about the Will and Elizabeth love story. I didn't think it was beautiful and engrossing and the best movie romance ever, but at least there was something to it. I mean, it was developed over 3 films, and it was kind of believable. The chemistry was there, and we knew what they were about. This one just feels like a very pale attempt to imitate that, and it's rushed and not developed at all, which makes the whole subplot really drag. At the end of the day, this is the worst Pirates film. It's not horrible, there are much worse franchises, and there are some enjoyable moments, but it has virtually none of the fun or charm of the first Pirates, and it's just so bland. I know a lot of people hate this film with a passion. I don't. I just think it's very meh. It's competently put together on the technical side, but as a film, it really made me feel nothing. I'll give Pirates 4 a 4.7 out of 10. So those were my thoughts on the 4 Pirates films. What do you think of these? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments. While you're at it, be sure to like this video, check out my Instagram and Twitter at BHL_Hudson, and subscribe for more videos like the one you just watched. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.